You probably have an idea of the watches you want to buy, but do you know about the ones you really shouldn't? Today I'm going to set the matter straight and tell you which watches you shouldn't even sully your barge pole with. The last one is probably the most important. Watches that look deceptively similar to the one you really want. I know what it's like. Those pesky watchmakers keep making watches that you really want. But you can't have them because those same pesky watchmakers also really want to make a lot of money. And so, as we've all done at some point or another, you found yourself entertaining the idea of purchasing a fake. It's like the good old days of movies surreptitiously filmed at a crotch-eye view. There was that one guy your dad knew down the pub that had all the latest blockbusters. Jurassic Place, Men in Suits, and of course the animated classic Lion Time. The sound quality was so good, you could almost hear it. And despite being harassed by videos you'd actually paid for, that your actions would destroy Hollywood, nothing happened. Well, they can't blame you for Marvel at least. So what harm is getting that fake really doing? Well, lots, really. Watchmakers aren't just companies, they're groups of impassioned people making what they love, and their HR departments. Okay, so they're not all beaming at their workstations like happy little elves, but they are doing work that makes you want that watch. And when you buy a fake, you're only buying that fake because of the work they did. And so if you like what they do, support it. And if you don't make other people think you do by buying a fake either. The same watch like 100 times. You remember during the pandemic there were people loading up their shopping trolleys with a mountain of toilet paper, and the world collectively wished upon them a night of 1,000 sheets. Doubly so when they weren't just panic buying, but intentionally creating scarcity to push up resale. The feeling is mutual for people who have a whole ton of the same watch. Now, I'm not talking about collectors who like to stick to a theme. That's a special kind of weird, but I get it. Gotta catch 'em all. No, I mean when you've got so many of exactly the same thing, it starts to look like you might be the kind of person who has a hidden chest freezer. But instead of a simple social disconnect / murderous tendency, buying lots of the same watch tends to err towards the side of resale. And that's kind of unfair if the watch is hard to get. There's no way anyone is enjoying 9 of exactly the same thing, except for my wife and fruit pastels. She'll only eat the red ones. Watches from the same place you get your clothes. Like any self-respecting man, I have my favourite store for buying all my clothes. I found a pair of jeans I liked, bought 9 of them, and that will keep me going until the smell becomes too unbearable or I blow out the underside. T-shirts too. I have all the colours, except for the ones on the next shelf along because I couldn't be bothered to reach for them. And if everything is perfectly optimal on my decennial shopping trip, I will buy both jeans and t-shirts from the same shop. Doesn't matter how much the bill is at the end, it's always too much. There's no jeans and t-shirt emporium expensive enough to also consider buying your watch from. Just don't even think about it. Would you buy engine oil from a dairy farmer? Aside from running the risk of a greasy milkshake, the two things are so completely different it would be too ridiculous to even contemplate. And given that the seams of my jeans seem to blow out faster than ever, I'm not sure I trust them to make a watch that won't have a pair of wheels hanging out the underside before too long. A watch you sold because you didn't like it, but now you think you do. Have you ever heard of the expression, out of sight, out of mind? Well, there's also the less popular but still relevant, out of sight, but I want to put it back into my sight because I've changed my mind. They're still working on it. If you've gone to all the trouble of getting rid of something, it was probably for a reason. Don't do what my daft dog does with anchovies and nibble it, spit it out in disgust, look at it on the floor, think, ooh, delicious, and repeat the whole process ad nauseum. You may think you've matured or you'll feel differently about it this time, but that's exactly what the English public thinks every time the men's team plays football on the world stage. No, we won't be good this time. We'll be crap like every other time. Try a different watch. And if you still can't stop thinking about that old watch you had and got rid of because you didn't like it anymore, try a Xanax. The watch you think makes you look like a big shot. I once bought a hat I thought I'd look incredibly cool in. I didn't. I looked like like I'd lost my carer. I realised some things that day. 1, I didn't have a head for hats, and 2, inanimate adornments aren't a magic bullet for change. Really, these decorations we buy for ourselves are just that. Decorations that accentuate or distract from what's already there. Take the humble Christmas tree. If we could get away with wrapping tinsel and twinkly lights around a vacuum cleaner, we would. Instead, we use it to hoover up all those supposedly non-drop needles. So don't buy a watch thinking it's going to change your persona and make you look different. If you saw Jason Statham wearing a Panerai and think it's going to make your thinning hair a feature instead of a flaw, think again.
Watches in disrepair you think you can fix.
Yes, I've watched Wristwatch Revival too, and now I think I'm an expert. I can say things like, there's end shake in my balance cock. How much hope do I have in repairing a lightly damaged wristwatch? Less than 0 hope? Marshall makes it look easy because of an unfair advantage he has called practice. I know. In the same way we're all above average drivers just waiting for our break in F1, I imagine we'd also be expert watchmakers in no time, if only we got around to it. And why waste time by practicing it when you can immediately get to work on what was still a pretty expensive watch that's now not going back together properly, and I think I've broken it more. Fixing watches is a lot like picking up dog crap. If you finish up without getting in the you've done a good job. And when you first try watchmaking, it's like picking up dog crap in a hurricane with your eyes shut. Learning is fun and I encourage it, but maybe start on something simpler like an old pocket watch or Lego.
Watches with stupid backstories and pictures of people outdoors.
Computer design, cheaper manufacturing, and cheap business loans have made it easier than ever before to make a watch. Now, before you go off a hollering and a hooting, I said a watch, not a good watch. Making a good watch, as is immediately apparent when you go trawling for one, is not easy at all. It requires things like creativity, experience, and an understanding of design. Without those things, there is another option. Make a watch anyway, and give it an origin story to make up for the sheer lack of anything else interesting to say about it. Perhaps the watch was concocted mid-hot air balloon race, or perhaps the founder has the uncanny ability to talk to dogs, or maybe, just maybe, the company was founded to honour the fallen of the Great Cheese Roll of 2005. Don't fall for these illusions. It's trickery, deceit. Behind the beguiling tales of romance and adventure on the number 4 bus from Coventry are watches that are as bland as a clip show episode of 2.5 Men sponsored by bread. But if that doesn't get you, they've got another trick too, and that's not just showing you the watches, but showing you the watches on the wrists of people enjoying this big scary place called outside. Look what fun they're having. See how they frolic with their friends. That's not real. That's a casting call for handsome 30-somethings.
Cheap watches because they're cheap.
The fear of missing out, or FOMO as I believe it was coined, according to the internet, by Dr. Sigmund Freud during a conversation with Abraham Lincoln, is real, and it runs deep in watch collectors. There's even a mathematical formula that goes something like this. Am I buying a watch right now? Plus no equals sadness. If we had all the money, we'd buy all the watches, but unfortunately for most people, that's not how it works. We have some of the money, and usually not that much of it. So the opportunity to buy a watch doesn't come all too often when those watches are, as they so often tend to be, skirting the limits of our financial boundaries like a Russian sub. There is a solution to that, although I don't condone it. Buying cheap watches. Are there great cheap watches out there? Yes. Should your collection include some of them? Why not? Should you buy cheap watches literally because you can? What do you think? A watch you can buy right here, right now can become overwhelmingly tempting despite not actually being the one you want, simply because it's available. Sober up or you'll regret it in the morning. Flick through the Rolex catalogue and get it out of your system. Because when post-haute horology clarity hits you and you realise you just pushed the watch you want back another month, you're going to wish you hadn't.
The watch that laughs at your salary and then eats it.
I don't really like the idea of logic, because logic isn't infallible. It should be by definition, but as my old nan used to say, it's not what it is, it's how you use it. Let me give you an example. Let's say I can afford about $5,000 at a push on a watch. That's the big one, the 40th birthday or whatever. But let's say if I bought a $10,000 watch, I could get one that's worth $2,000 more out the door. Sounds like sensible reasoning, doesn't it? Except that plan relies on the sale of said watch, which isn't the plan at all. It's a mirage, a ghost, and paying $10,000 still costs twice as much as $5,000. They call this kind of thinking man maths, and it's used to justify irrational and dangerous expenditure. I don't call it that. I call it passion rationalization, or passionalization. It's fine to play fast and loose with the rules because it makes us happy. Yeah, sure it does. Until it doesn't. We work so hard for our money and sometimes it seems like we can't get rid of it all fast enough. They also say money can't buy happiness. I don't know. I've never been able to hang on to it long enough to find out.
Any watch that claims to make your life better.
I don't mean how Patek Philippe makes an adjacent promise to stop your son growing up to hate you with the offer of a free watch, but wrist-worn smart timekeeping devices that claim to improve everything with data. People seem to be covering themselves with more sensors than a Formula 1 car under the guise that it'll make them a better person. I don't know if you've noticed, but we come fresh out the box with inbuilt sensors already. They're called feelings, and generally speaking they do a cracking job of telling us when things are good and things are bad. I get it if you have some sort of medical thing, I don't expect you to guess your blood sugar based on feel. But more data doesn't always mean more good. In many cases it's more overwhelming, more confusing, more stressful, especially in relation to health and relaxation. It's so easy to draw the wrong and worst conclusion from data that really all it does is spiral the problem it was intended to fix. As in F1, even with all the satellites and radars and sensors, sometimes the easiest way to see if it's raining is to hold your hand out.
Watches that lean too heavily on the word innovation.
Right, I don't know if you've noticed this, but watches, mechanical watches, are pointless. Once upon a time, they were the greatest thing since we brokered a deal with dogs to bite other people and not us, but now they're consigned to the same bin as the Filofax and mixtapes. So when I'm enjoying my daily dose of watch blurb and I see the word innovation pop up, I'm always intrigued. Surely not. Has this 200-year-old manufacturer of sparkly antiquities finally invented a portable way to itch the part of my back I can't reach? Or perhaps they've discovered a form of leather that actually smells better the more I sweat into it? No. Whatever it is, it's always as innovative as a soluble anchor. Yet they just can't help themselves but dish out that word like horological Oprah. It's all part of watch manufacturer bingo, and the more words like that I read, the more disappointing I know the actual watch will be.
On paper watches that are uglier than death.
I bought a printer recently. Yes, sick of the inkjet cartel and its self-immolating cartridges, I invested in lasers, the future we were all promised. I never knew life could be this fun. The criteria for me was that it had to hold a bunch of paper, fit on the table I already had, and print what I told it to when I damn well told it to, and not after printing out something it fancied with bits missing. Never in that decision-making process did I care what it looked like. Would it be cooler if it were styled like a 50s jukebox? Business idea? Of course it would. Did that matter to me? No, because I hadn't dreamt of one day owning a laser printer. Okay, maybe a little. Watches are different. It can have all the sapphire, all the chronometer, and all the hacking you like. That doesn't mean diddly-do if it's uglier than a pig on a pylon. These watches aren't white goods. They're pointless for a start. You can't fulfill the want of wanting with a spec sheet.
A watch you're pretending to like.
Furthermore, don't say you do like that watch when you clearly don't. No one can. It's an abomination. Yes, it's the cheapest, insert complication here. Yes, it's got 20% off in the sale that definitely doesn't happen at every legally allowable opportunity. And yes, it's made by a brand that somehow escapes the ire of the Watches Circle Jerk subreddit. But stop. That's not love you're feeling. That's a desperate hope that somehow the universe has cut you a break. Sorry, it hasn't. That only happens to other people.
Any watch you could realistically use as a shield.
I'm not really one for telling people what kind of style suits them best unless it really doesn't, and I'm afraid when the watch looks like it's wearing you, that's my threshold. The big watch trend died with short sleeves over long sleeves and home ownership, and we're heading back to where this all started, small. When a watch is doing a passable impression of the Space Needle on your wrist, I'm afraid it's just not going to work out. Why does it look so wrong? Clowns. Maybe if we lived in an alternate universe where people didn't dress up in equal parts amusing and terrifying outfits to entertain and traumatize, an oversized watch might look fine. As it happens, they go in the same pile as long shoes, big noses, and vacant murderous stares.
The watch you think is going to make you rich.
There are two ways to make a fortune. One way is to work hard, and the other way is to have someone give it to you. One is easier than the other, and statistically speaking, neither will work for you, because actually there's a third way, and by third way I mean only way. Luck. Some people made a whole ton of money buying steel. Some people made a whole ton of money buying Bitcoin. Some people made a whole ton of money buying watches. loads more people didn't. Most of them, in fact, and by the time the news reaches us lot that it's even possible that ship hasn't just sailed, it's been decommissioned and dismantled for scrap. The guys who made a bunch of cash on watches had the watches before anyone had any idea that they would be worth a bunch of cash. The people who own them now are the ones who got stuck with them after they stopped being worth a bunch of cash. It's for the best to just be a casual observer.
A watch you hope will stop you thinking about that other watch.
It's pretty wild when you think about it that we can take a pill that stops us feeling pain. Like, whatever's causing the pain can still be there, but that pill stands in front of it, points somewhere else and says to your brain, oh look, a squirrel. And it works. Now, I may have flunked my online med school course and I may be practicing without a license, but I know enough to tell you that buying watches doesn't work in the same way. You can't pick up something that's available to you and hope it distracts you from something else that, as of yet, isn't. If anything, it does the opposite, by making it more apparent that the watch you want is now even further away. It's like a hammer blow to the head to cure knee pain, which I am proud to say my medical firm no longer practices.
Any watch you plan on getting used to.
Here's a real fact for you about me. I don't drink. I mean, I consume liquids, but non-alcoholic ones only. It's not a moral or religious thing, I just don't particularly like it. No, not even that one. Yes, I have tried it. Why are you so desperate to justify your day drinking to me, Auntie Meryl? Upon hearing this information, the reasoning I receive in reply most often is that I'm simply not used to it yet, not accustomed, like those first few ball shriveling moments in a cold sea that eventually fade away. Well, newsflash. I don't like the cold sea either, and I already have a list of things I very much do like. I'm happy to try new things, but I'm not willing to keep trying them over and over in the hope that one day they'll become tolerable. And I implore you not to apply Auntie Meryl's advice to watches either. Don't buy it thinking that if you wear it out and about a few times that you'll start to warm to it. Doesn't matter that everyone else has got one. If they all jumped into a Hublot store, would you do that too?
Watches you have already decided you won't wear.
Have you ever had that experience where everyone else in the world does something different to you? Something you thought was completely normal? Like wearing swimming trunks in the shower or standing up to wipe. Sorry dude, I hate to break it to you, but that's just you. Well, apparently there are people who buy watches that they know they won't wear before they've even got them. I don't have any particular advice or insight on this one because I don't really understand why. I'm not even talking about people who buy them to invest, but who genuinely pick a watch they think they want and order it whilst also being pretty plain with themselves about their likelihood of actually wearing it. Is that you? Help me out here. Why?
A watch you didn't know about more than 5 minutes ago.
Impulses are great things. There's one that says, take your hand off that, it's really hot. I use that one a lot when cooking. Or another one that goes, why don't you steer the car into the central reservation and see what happens? That one's less useful. I've only used it once. Somewhere in between the really handy ones and the plain psychotic ones is that fella that tells you to buy something you've literally just discovered. It very rationally lists all the clear-cut reasons why that thing is the answer to the mysteries of life, the universe and everything, and why it will help you achieve purest enlightenment. And I will admit, there's nothing quite as satisfying as finally discovering the perfect gizmo for solving that very particular problem. But with watches, there isn't a problem to solve. In fact, so much of the enjoyment comes from taking the time to mull. Mulling is also one of the most satisfying things to do. I've mulled over things for literal years. Take time to enjoy taking time.
Watches that attempt to meet an empty need for fulfillment.
Think of the human brain as a piece of unironically relevant Swiss cheese. There are lots of different holes or different shapes and sizes that can be plugged by doing different things. Some of the smaller ones are indeed fulfilled by making a watch purchase, or by going on a trip, or even eating a damn good sandwich. But others are different. Those only fit spending time with friends and family, or feeling like your actions are a net contribution. Buying watches just won't cut it for those fundamentals. If you do feel like something is missing, like you don't have worth or that your existence is superfluous, I'm afraid something material isn't the answer. Speak to someone. Engage in a dialogue. Just because you can afford watches doesn't mean you're invulnerable to how tough things are getting. Don't self-medicate with watches and don't suffer alone. What are your top watches to avoid? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and if you do know someone who's being a little quieter than usual, check in and see how they're doing. Goodbye. Still here? Watch this video next.